The Oklahoma twister block is shown here in this sample using one accent fabric and one background fabric. There are so many different ways you can color this fabric because you see it has movement going through it like this, and it also has a pinwheel in the center. So the piece I'm going to show you in the demonstration is going to be like I made the quilt that you saw before. If you go to the video description, you can download this information sheet. It's not really the instructions, but it shows a layout of the quilt, and it shows a bigger version of the block that you can use this version as you're piecing, because it can get very complicated to see how these half square triangles are all positioned. And on this side there's a link to the video, to this video on the download. Some information about the block. It's 12 inches and we're going to have 35 blocks set 5 across and 7 down. And then it gives the fabric requirements, and it also gives some information if you're using your AccuQuilt. So download those if you want to put it in your collection. For one block you'll need 2 large squares of the accent fabric and 2 large squares of the background fabric. These squares will be used to make half square triangles 8 at a time, and we're going to do 2 sets for a total of 16 half square triangles. Also for one block you'll need 8 squares at 2.5 inches and 4 rectangles at 2.5 by 6 inches. Now the next part of the video will show you how to make these triangles 8 at a time. There is a link in the description of the video where you can download a chart that tells you how big to cut these squares for whatever size you need. So to take 2 squares, cut to the same size, starch the fabric. Now put them right sides together. On the right light colored fabric you're going to flip it over and you're going to draw 2 diagonal lines the same way we did with the half square triangles 2 at a time, only we're going to do diagonals in both directions. So again, lay your points of your corners right on the 45-degree line of the mat. Take your ruler and go just to the left-hand side so the points are exposed so you can mark from point to point. And this is a friction pin. So I'm going to mark here and all the way down. So there's one diagonal. Flip it around, line up for the next one, and make sure your fabric is even. Then mark the second diagonal, same way. And you'll stitch the same way on these. You'll stitch on either side of both diagonal lines, so you'll have 4 rows of stitching. Alright, I did that whole segment of stitching and cutting without the record button turned on, so I'm going to start over again. So here I have marked my diagonal lines and I've stitched on either side of the diagonal lines here in black. Now what you're going to do is first cut the square in half both ways, and this square was cut 5 3/4, so I'm going to cut it in half at 2 7/8. It should be right along the lines here, the intersecting lines, so it is. And then cut it in half on this direction, 2 7/8. I had to use my calculator to figure this out. And then once you cut both of them in half, cut along this diagonal line. So there's 2, there's 4. Cut this in half, 2 7/8 on this one. And on the diagonal line. Now, if you open it up and you press either to the one side or press your seams open, and you should have a perfect 2.5, in this case 2.5 inch cut half square triangle. So I would go through and then cut off these nubs. And do the same with all of these. Once your triangles are all finished and they're pressed and you've cut off the little nubs, we're going to separate them out. These blocks are going to have the different pinwheel in the center instead of all the same fabric. So we take out 4 half square triangles from one stack and switch them with 4 from another stack. So these will all be used to piece one block, and these will all be used to piece another block. And the pinwheels, the 4 that you took out, are going to be in the center. I've laid out all the pieces for one block, and I've stacked the pieces for another block and the way we want to piece them. In the beginning I said that this was a 4 patch, so if we move these pieces out of the way like this, we see that this is the 4 patch unit if we sew all these together. So what we can do is stack all of our pieces like this and sew 4 pieces together like this. It's much less confusing than piecing the whole block all at once, because you will get triangles turned around because it's easy to do. So what we're going to do, I'm going to move all these out of the way. I'm going to sew these rows together first. So I'll sew these to that, and then that to this. So this row, then this row, and then piece this top. Here are the 4 pieces, the 4 patches. These are all sewn together and pressed. And you know that the center that's different is going to be the pinwheel. So if we lay these out like this, and the pinwheels are going to start forming, and then there is your twister block with the different outsides. The swirls on the outside are different than the pinwheels. Next, you're going to sew these together just like any 4 patch. Turn these over and stitch these together. Now we have our 2 halves stitched together, and I pressed toward this triangle where the base of the triangle is on the seam line. I pressed towards this triangle on both of them. So the seams are pressed in opposite directions. See, this one's pressed that way and this one's pressed this way. Now we're going to sew these together. Here we are at the very center of the block. And we're going to take these, this is the seam we just stitched going across here. And this line of stitching that goes straight up from this previously sewn stitch. We're going to remove these few stitches right here. There's probably only 2 or 3. And just take them out. Then flip it over and take these other ones out. The same stitches that go straight up. This is a diagonal stitch. We don't want to take that out. We're going to take out just the straight stitches. Now we're going to look at the block, and this seam is pressed to the left. This seam is pressed to the right. So we want to have the seams going in a circular motion. So we're going to press this seam down and this seam up, and just push it one up and one down, and then I'm going to press this. So now this seam is pressed down and this seam is pressed up. And let's turn it over and look at what it does in the center. If you can see, this center has a little swirl pattern, so we were able to press that flat. And that's what you want, a nice flat seam. And this is the way I like to do center seams that have 8 pieces in the intersection. Here are the different variations of this block. This has the light pinwheel in the center. This one has the dark pinwheel in the center. And this one is one color. And after seeing these made, I'm thinking, since there's so much background in this block, that I like the effect of the solid or solid looking fabric better than the print fabric. This is interesting, but some of these are too light, I think, onto this background. So I really think that the darker fabrics and the fabrics that look solid from a distance are better for this quilt. One bonus you have with this block, when you sew the blocks together, you only have to match one seam. This is the only seam right in the center that has to match. And these other ones, it has a straight piece, so you have no matching seams there. Bonus. Thank you for watching, and be sure to check the information and the downloads in the description of this video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much.